6 different deaths in 2021 occurred while users were actively signed on to the augmented reality app hIDeout, designed by Morningstar Games. In each instance, their phone was still aglow in their dead hands. One of the victims, Tom Caywood of Hartford, Connecticut, encountered this mysterious program 3 times during the final day of his life. This is his account of how one app's immersive experience augmented their user's reality into a nightmare. In order for that girl to have landed that far from her building, she would have needed to engage in a dead run off her own roof. That's all I could remember thinking as my walk to the office was stopped in its tracks by an ambulance and squad cars. They were covering the body of a dead woman, but myself and other onlookers had already witnessed enough. Skulls smashed open, limbs bent at obscene angles. That sheet failed to conceal the most disturbing detail. The woman still clutched her cell phone, brightly painted nails of her smooth young hand wrapped like a claw around it. A woman nearby gasped, "Is that rigor mortis?" That didn't seem enough for me. That dead girl's grip on her phone, it felt like the cause of death. That idea bored into my brain, that she had hurled herself headlong off a 9-story building. For that entire drop, screaming the entire way, she had kept a hold of her phone. Her knuckles were still white around the screen, upon which I could see a spinning logo, a lowercase h followed by an uppercase I and a D. hID. Id. I don't know. Something about the way it spun caught my eye and wouldn't let go. As I stared into it, I couldn't ignore an odd hum coming from somewhere else, distant. It was that symbol. I didn't know it at the time. I wish I never had. I went on with my day. I had to, with a heavy, morose fog over me. Starting a day witnessing a death? Yeah, that can do it to you, huh? I guess so. I swam through work. Another day of dreary drudgery exactly like the one before, and what I thought would be the one after it. After work, I was obligated to visit my aging father in his assisted living home. I once used caring for him as an excuse not to go home and face the pain of my ailing marriage. Since my divorce, it was now the only social life that I was left with. But visiting Dad today brought with it a new horror, a digital one. No longer in the hands of a stranger, no. It was following me all the way home. Dad has always had trouble with electronics. It took him years to work his VCR. Now, he sticks with his VHS collection as his too complicated DVD player gathers dust. Don't get him started on streaming. The last few years have been a series of battles to set up his internet, his digital photo frame, even the coffee maker. And that's why I was very surprised to find him hunched over his cell phone, mashing buttons with a fervor that I had never seen him give a digital device. He didn't even hear me come in. "Dad, what are you doing?" No answer. For a moment, it felt like I was trying to talk about chores to my teenage daughter Zoe when she was texting her friends. My relationship with her had become a series of forgotten arrangements, forced conversations. Here, however, it was a little bit charmingly odd to have my aging father ignore me in the same way she had learned to. But when I snuck over his shoulder to steal a glance at his screen, all that charm melted into horror. The air turned frigid all around me as I still saw that same logo, the spinning hID I remembered with dread from the still grasped fist of that dead girl in the road. And here it was, casting this eerie luminescence across the face of my confused, elderly father. And there was that distant hum as well. It was like it was trying to drill into my brain. He jumped when I tapped his shoulder. "Well, what are you doing here? Tom, I can't get this to work." "Dad, what is it?" And that's when I heard the word for the first time. hIDeout. It's a phone thing, all my friends were talking about it at the diner. hIDeout, hIDeout. They were like broken records. But then I saw the logo and I don't know. I couldn't stop thinking about it. My distress at the dead girl's app in my father's hands now mixed with confusion. Dad wasn't one to just jump on the latest fad, even if his crew of coffee buds were into it. There was something compulsive about the way that he was tapping at his screen. There was a dark drive to it. So, maybe just leave it alone then. His frustrated state kept me from telling him about what I saw earlier in that day, even if he and the deceased seemed to have an ill-advised hobby in common. Come on, maybe it's just not for you. But Dad wasn't one for being told what to do. Instead of distracting him away, I only made him more thirsty to figure out his Wi-Fi connection. So I held back from helping, and he could tell. What does this do anyway? His eyes had this perverse wonder that really disturbed me. The guys said it's like looking into another world. It's like wildest dreams and stuff, like seeing who you really are. Those words would have sounded poetic if it wasn't so damn sad, too. I never heard him talk like that. Dad, come on, do you not think you see who you really are? He had no answer. He just kept thumbing his ancient, never updated phone. Probably too ancient and never updated to run hIDeout at all. I offered him no help, and I'm very sure he didn't even notice me leave. Now I had a name to match that logo, hIDeout, so I did some research on my subway ride home. hIDeout was the flagship app of Morningstar Games, a mysterious tech company notorious for keeping the names of all executives secret. Even after going public, not even one thing was known about the anonymous CEO. That was hardly the normal proud flexing of a successful tech bro. But when it was introduced, Morningstar heralded hIDeout as the first augmented reality app to introduce users to their true self. Hide out where you truly belong. And one review said, "Feeling lost? Find your true self with hIDeout where you belong. A revolutionary new therapy that I can't wait to try." Can't wait to. Some of these reviews felt suspicious, like none of them had actually experienced hIDeout for themselves. Reading about it lodged the image of that spinning logo in my mind. I couldn't get it out of my head, so before I even knew what my fingers were doing, I found myself downloading it. Was it curiosity? Is it needing to know more about what my father was getting into? Well, whatever it was, I felt a dopamine rush as I saw that opening notification. "Welcome to hIDeout, Tom. We've been waiting for you." How did it already know my name? Did I already enter it? I couldn't remember. It was probably able to tug the info off my phone itself. I did marvel at this, but I also noticed my reflection in the dark screen of the phone itself. It seemed to be staring at me, but with eyes that didn't seem like mine at all. Once I peered closer, however, the entire phone screen glitched and flickered, and then it set back to normal as I once again heard that mysterious hum, feeling powerfully compelled as my finger hovered over the Create hIDeout button. But then I was totally shaken out of it by the next subway station announced, several stops past my own. I had never missed it before. I must have lost track of time. I closed the app. It was probably for the best. And I hopped off for a long walk home. I arrived just in time to find Zoe making her exit. I immediately knew that I had blown it again. With all that had happened today, I completely forgot about our weekly dinner arrangement. And to be honest, I'd failed her so many times before, sometimes for reasons I felt too guilty to admit. I mean, the job I dreamed of to support her was now the fissure between us. If she was upset, she was packing it down well, like she always did. She stayed glued to her phone as she stepped to the curb, and I needed to ask, "What app are you using?" And with a sour side eye, she kept me in my place. "Just the rideshare to take me back to Mom's?" "Not that it's any of your business." "See you next week, if you decide to make it." I deserved that. I was just relieved that hIDeout hadn't been her answer. I watched her driven off by a total stranger to return to my ex-wife, Cheryl. A deep melancholy washed over me. I stepped inside, no one to talk to about my troubles, my dreary day, the damn death I witnessed. I sat numb on my couch, and then I fired up the hIDeout app. I could feel the world around me melted away by that otherworldly hum as I created my login. A button glowed. Ready to hide out? Hell yes, I was. I tapped in. The button push brought up the immediately familiar image of a male figure in silhouette, back to the camera. That gait, the height, a bit of slump to the right shoulder. That's me. It's surreal to stare at yourself from behind. I mean, when do you ever get to do that? But there I was. I didn't want to peel my eyes away, but I did just long enough to look behind me and wonder, how was it doing this? I mean, I had no answer, but I couldn't bear the real world any longer, so I dove back into the screen. This app was incredibly intuitive. Just one slight move of my thumbs on the screen and my image walked through the terrain of the app. This game seemed to take place in a long and endless version of the room that I was in, except everything was somehow more perfect. My ratty old couch, it was brand new. There's no dust anywhere. Everything metallic gleamed, sharp enough to slice yourself open on. I instantly felt how addictive this experience was. I walked the photorealistic image of me around that simulated space, and it felt so real. It was just like the name, a perfect hideout from the world around me. But I couldn't shake that it felt very lonely, too. There was a stark pain to seeing me within that tiny glass, traveling my house alone. In a way, it augmented exactly how I felt in real life. Then, the figure wasn't alone anymore, but oh, how I wish it had stayed so. I had figured out how to motivate the figure up the stairs of my simulated house. Tilting the phone also served to move the figure, and that's when I saw her. Right there at the top of the stairs, it was Cheryl. Cheryl was framed in the doorway of my bedroom. My lips dropped apart and a heavy exhale brought forth just one word. How? How did this app know how to create such a perfect version of her? The woman that I used to share this room with in good times, and then in times a bit more frigid. But now, somehow it was creating the good again. She stepped to me. I've been waiting for you to hide out here with me. My heart leapt. There we were again, together in love, long before I'd made any of my mistakes. But then the image of my ex-wife started to distort before my eyes. Then an icy chill crawled up my spine, each vertebrae snapping with what felt like a metallic charge of terror. The angles of her limbs cracked askew in a way that just looked wrong, unnatural. And she was coming for me. I couldn't pull away as this woman that I loved once again pressed herself to me, lifting a leg to wrap around, just as her features continued to contort. Her bare shoulder blades grew out from her neck monstrously. Her eyebrows stretched up off the confines of her forehead, forming a dark, judgmental arch. This was Cheryl, but not Cheryl. This, not Cheryl's jaw, then slowly lowered down in a ghastly maw that stretched down the length of her torso. The corners of her mouth cut up into her temples as she snarled. Beads of sweat formed on my real face. My hand clutched the phone. I was horrified, but I couldn't stop playing. I couldn't stop doom-gazing into this augmented version of her. This was how she really was to me now, how she really felt, and this horrible but true image of the woman that I once loved reached out and grasped its lengthening claws around the throat of the Tom on the screen. And, oh God, I felt it, for real. That clammy and impossibly long palm pressed to my throat, wrapping around it, those sharp nails digging into the base of my neck and all the way down to the small of my back. The not Cheryl's eyes melted down her cheeks like black ink. Her figure glitched with a digital flicker as it lifted me off of my real chair as it growled, "Hiding from me like you always did. Now you'll always be in here, with me, with them." Her arm flung the figure on screen, and my real body was suddenly and violently hurled across my real room as well. I cried out, feeling this wet patch of blood grow in my hair where my head had struck the stone mantle. The walls around me seemed to breathe, pulsating in perfect sync with my racing heartbeat. What was happening to me in real life, however, to the flesh of my real body, meant nothing to me anymore. All I cared about was what happened next to my avatar on screen. I felt my actual body scrape across the floor as the not Cheryl dragged his body into the next simulated room, where a vision of Zoe appeared next, standing still as a statue and whispering, "Dad, I miss you." Those words sent a shockwave through me. Everything I dreamed that she would truly feel about me until then, that damnable flicker occurred again, and her smile stretched impossibly wide, glaring at me as the smile cracked her face in half before me. Her hair whipped through the air above her unnaturally, eyes aglow with the kind of pent-up rage that I always suspected she had been building for me in real life. Her mouth dropped open, voice booming like the roar of a beast, hiding out from both of us. Forever and always. Fine. Let's give you what you always wanted. And with those words, the walls of that hideout version of my home opened wide to reveal an endless version of my cubicle at work, my office stretching on to an infinite horizon. The perverse versions of Zoe and Cheryl grabbed at my flesh, tearing it as they tore my body to the closest office terminal and shoved me into it. It was battering and bruising my real body, but there it was, the phone in my hand, my knuckles as white as the dead girls I had seen just that morning. Behind the image of not Cheryl, thudding footsteps brought with it a brutish version of my father. It joined them as they pressed the Tom avatar into the cubicle, all of them chanting, "Hide out here. Hide out how you've always done. Never enough. Now you shall stay here in your hideout forever." The brutalized body of Tom Caywood was found 7 days later when his daughter showed up for their weekly dinner. She was still screaming when the authorities showed up to scrape his remains off his dining room wall. The police report stayed vague and was quickly hidden away due to the lack of answers. There was no sign of forced entry. There was no evidence of anyone else having been in the room at the time of death. Despite this, the coroner concluded his body had been hammered into the wall repeatedly, over and over, even after death. He broke a pair of metal forceps trying to pry the still glowing phone from Caywood's dead hand. After seeing the hideout logo on it, the coroner tried the app out for himself that very night. He was dead 48 hours later. Similar horrors were reported around the world, but Morningstar Games turned the tragedies into clever marketing. Their upcoming Hideout 2.0 used what happened to Tom as a selling point, promising the updated version would provide a better experience and show the world what they feel they really deserve. Across the globe, screens are flickering to life with that spinning logo and that distant, eerie hum. Check your app store. Hideout may be waiting for you, too. Or are you already too lost in the power that your apps hold over you? After all, Hideout revealed that what Tom Caywood felt he deserved meant game over. For more scary horror stories, please share and subscribe.